The morning sun peeked through the blinds of Rosie's diner, casting long stripes of light across the checkered floor. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air as May wiped down the counter for what felt like the 1,000th time this week. "It was only Tuesday. Order up," called Jerry from the kitchen, his voice rough from years of shouting the same two words. May grabbed the plates, one stack of pancakes, one Denver omelet, and balanced them along her arm with the skill that comes only from years of practice. At 32, she had the routine down to an art form. "Here you go, folks. Careful, the plates are hot," she said, placing the food in front of an older couple who had been coming to Rosie's every Tuesday morning for as long as May had worked there. 8 years now, though it wasn't supposed to be this long. It was never supposed to be this long. "Thanks, sweetie," Mrs. Chen said, reaching for the syrup. "How's your mom doing?" May forced her smile to stay in place. "Better this week. The new medication seems to be helping with the pain." What she didn't say was that the new medication cost nearly double what the old one did, or that she'd picked up 3 extra shifts this month to cover it. Some things were better left unsaid, especially to kind people who couldn't really help anyway. "Well, you tell her we're praying for her," Mr. Chen said, already cutting into his omelet. "I will. Enjoy your breakfast." May moved on to her next table, refilling coffee cups and taking orders, her mind half on her work and half on the stack of bills waiting on her kitchen table at home. Electric was due Friday. Mom's medicine needed to be refilled next Monday. The car was making that clicking sound again. "Hey, Earth to May." May blinked, suddenly aware that Danny, the other morning waitress, was talking to her. Danny was barely 21, still bright-eyed about everything. She hadn't yet developed the particular kind of tiredness that came from doing the same job day after day, year after year. "Sorry, what?" "I asked if you could cover my shift on Friday. My boyfriend got tickets to this concert and—" "Sure," May said, not needing to hear the rest. Another shift meant another $60 plus tips. Maybe enough to finally get the car looked at. "Really? You're the best." Danny hugged her quickly, then bounced off to greet the new customers who had just walked in. The diner filled up as the morning went on. The regulars came and went, the construction crew from the site down the block, the retirees who lingered over coffee for hours, the hurried business people grabbing breakfast to go. May knew most of their orders by heart. Around 11, during the brief lull before the lunch rush, Tom, the owner, came in carrying a large piece of furniture covered with a drop cloth. He was followed by 2 delivery guys struggling with what appeared to be the other half of whatever Tom had brought. "What's that?" May asked, pausing with a coffee pot in hand. Tom grinned, pulling off the drop cloth with a flourish. "This, May, is our new attraction." It was a piano, an upright model, old but beautiful, with rich mahogany wood that had been polished until it glowed. "You bought a piano?" May asked, something tightening in her chest. "Got it for a steal at an estate auction. Guy said it still plays perfectly. Figure it'll class up the joint a bit. Maybe bring in a different crowd." The delivery men positioned it against the wall in the corner where a fake plant had stood for years. Once it was in place, they stepped back and Tom handed them each a 20 before they left. "Can you play?" Danny asked, appearing at May's side. May felt her throat close up. "No," she lied. Never learned, but she couldn't stop looking at it. The lunch rush came and went. May moved between tables, taking orders, delivering food, clearing dishes, all while acutely aware of the piano in the corner. It sat there like a ghost from another life, from before her father had died and left them with nothing but debt, before her mother's illness had consumed what little savings they had, before May had left music school with nothing but half a degree and a broken heart. By mid-afternoon, the diner was nearly empty again. Just a couple of teenagers sharing a plate of fries and Mr. Rivera, who came in every day at 3:15 for a piece of pie after his shift at the post office. "I've never seen you so distracted," Mr. Rivera said when May refilled his coffee cup for the 3rd time without being asked. "Something on your mind?" May glanced at the piano again, then quickly away. "Just tired," she said. Mr. Rivera followed her gaze. "Ah, the new edition. Play anything?" "No," May said again, the lie coming easier this time. Mr. Rivera smiled kindly. "That's too bad. My wife played, before arthritis got her fingers. Said it was the best way to say things words couldn't." May nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She remembered that feeling, the way music could express everything that stayed bottled up inside. Joy, pain, hope, fear. All of it could flow through her fingers and into the keys, transformed into something beautiful even when the emotions themselves were anything but. The rest of her shift passed slowly. Every time the bell above the door rang, May looked up, only to feel a strange mix of relief and disappointment when it was just another customer, not someone coming to play the piano. By 7, her feet ached and her lower back throbbed from bending to wipe tables and lift heavy trays. She clocked out, exchanging tired smiles with the evening staff coming in. "See you tomorrow," she called to Tom, who was going through receipts at the register. "Bright and early," he replied without looking up. Outside, the evening air was cool against her skin. May stood for a moment, rolling her shoulders to work out the knots that had formed there. The walk to the bus stop was short, but today it felt longer than usual. Each step took her further from the piano, and somehow that made her chest ache in a way she hadn't felt in years. On the bus, she leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. Unbidden, her fingers began to tap against her thigh, playing a piece she hadn't thought about in nearly a decade, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Her teacher had once said she played it with unusual depth for someone so young, that she had a gift. What a joke that seemed now. A gift she couldn't use, couldn't afford to keep. The bus lurched to a stop, jolting May from her thoughts. She gathered her bag and stepped off, walking the last 3 blocks to the small apartment she shared with her mother. "I'm home," she called softly as she entered, in case her mom was napping. "In here," came the reply from the living room. May found her mother in her usual spot on the couch, a crocheted blanket over her legs despite the warmth of the evening. At 58, Lin Zhang looked much older, her illness having carved deep lines into her face and turned her once black hair completely gray. But her eyes were still sharp and missed nothing. "You look troubled," she said as May bent to kiss her cheek. "Just tired," May said, the same excuse she'd given Mr. Rivera. "How was your day?" "The same. Mrs. Patel from next door brought over some of that soup you like. It's in the fridge." May nodded, dropping her bag on a chair and heading to the kitchen to warm up the soup. Her mother's good days were becoming rare, and on bad days she could barely make it from the bedroom to the living room without help. The thought of her struggling to the door to accept food from a neighbor made May's chest tighten again. "Anything interesting happen at work?" her mother called. May paused, her hand on the microwave door. "Tom bought a piano," she said finally. "For the diner." There was a moment of silence. "A piano?" "Yeah, an upright. Old but nice." Another silence. "Did you play it?" May closed the microwave door harder than necessary and punched in the time. "No, why would I?" When she returned to the living room with the soup, her mother was watching her with knowing eyes. "Because you love to play," she said simply. May set the bowl down on the coffee table more carefully than needed. "Loved," she corrected. Past tense. Her mother just looked at her with that same knowing expression. The past is never as far behind us as we think. May didn't answer. Instead, she turned on the TV, finding a game show her mother enjoyed. They watched in companionable silence as May ate her soup. Later, after helping her mother to bed and taking a quick shower, May sat at their small kitchen table with the bills spread out before her. She made the same calculations she made every month, moving numbers around like puzzle pieces that never quite fit together. Even with the extra shifts, it was going to be tight, very tight. She rubbed her eyes, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Without meaning to, her thoughts drifted back to the piano at the diner. What would happen if she played it? Just once when no one was around. Would it feel the same? Or would it just be another reminder of dreams she couldn't afford to keep? May pushed the bills aside and rested her head on her arms. Tomorrow would be another long day. Another day of coffee pots and order pads, of aching feet and forced smiles. Just another day being the waitress, as if that was all she was or ever would be. As she drifted off to sleep at the table, her fingers twitched slightly, playing silent music only she could hear. 3 weeks passed, and the piano sat untouched in the corner of Rosie's diner. Customers would glance at it occasionally, some asking Tom if he planned to hire someone to play. He'd laugh and say he was working on it, though May knew he had no such plans. The piano was just decoration, a conversation piece. But for May, it was a daily reminder of what she'd lost. What she'd given up. "You're staring at it again," Danny said one afternoon, nudging May with her elbow as they both stood behind the counter during a rare quiet moment. May blinked, caught. I was just wondering if it's actually in tune, she said, busying herself with wiping down the already clean countertop. Only one way to find out, Danny replied with a grin. You sure you don't play? Not even chopsticks? I'm sure, May said, the lie bitter on her tongue. The truth was she'd played since she was 5 years old. Her father had taught her first, sitting her on his lap at their second hand upright, guiding her small fingers over the keys. By the time she was 8, she was playing pieces most adults struggled with. At 12, she'd performed with the youth symphony. At 17, she'd earned a scholarship to the conservatory. Then her father died suddenly. Her mother got sick. The money ran out, and just like that, music became a luxury they couldn't afford. Order up. Jerry's voice broke through her thoughts. The day went on like any other. Coffee, orders, small talk, tips. By the end of her double shift, May's feet throbbed and her back ached. But as she hung up her apron, she couldn't help but look at the piano once more. Lock up for me when you leave? Tom asked, already halfway out the door. Got to pick up my kid from soccer practice. Sure, May agreed. It wasn't unusual. She often closed up when Tom had family obligations. The last customers left shortly after. Danny had already gone, claiming a headache. Jerry finished cleaning the grill and said goodnight, leaving through the back door. And then for the first time in years, May found herself alone with a piano. She finished her closing duties slowly, wiping down tables with extra care, sweeping the floor twice. But eventually, there was nothing left to do but turn out the lights and leave. Instead, she found herself walking toward the piano. Just to check if it's in tune, she told herself. Just curious. The bench was old but sturdy. May sat down slowly, half expecting someone to walk in and catch her, though the closed sign was clearly visible on the door. She lifted the fallboard that covered the keys, revealing ivory and ebony that glowed softly in the dimmed lights of the diner. Her hands hovered over the keys, suddenly unsure. It had been so long. What if she couldn't play anymore? What if the music was gone? Only one way to find out, she whispered to herself, echoing Danny's earlier words. Gently, she pressed a single key. A clear C note rang out, then another, and another. Before she knew it, her fingers were moving on their own, finding the opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune, the piece she'd played at her father's funeral. The piano was slightly out of tune, but not terribly so. May closed her eyes, letting muscle memory guide her. The music flowed through her like water breaking through a dam. Unstoppable, powerful healing. She'd forgotten how it felt, this release, like finally taking a deep breath after being underwater too long. She moved from Debussy to Chopin, then to a Bach piece she'd once known by heart. Some parts were rusty, her fingers stumbling over passages that had once been effortless. But it didn't matter. For the first time in years, she was playing again. So lost was May in the music that she didn't notice the figure watching her through the diner's window, didn't see the phone held up recording her performance, didn't realize that her private moment was no longer private at all. When the last notes faded, May sat in silence, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't cried in so long. Not when they lost the house, not when she dropped out of school, not even when the doctor said her mother's condition was chronic and would only worsen. She'd been too busy surviving to allow herself the luxury of tears. But now they came freely, a release as powerful as the music itself. The sound of soft applause startled her. May whipped around to find Mr. Rivera standing just inside the door, a gentle smile on his face. I forgot my reading glasses, he explained, holding them up. The door was unlocked. I didn't mean to intrude, but that was beautiful. May wiped her cheeks quickly, embarrassed. I was just checking if it worked, she said lamely. Mr. Rivera's smile widened. It seems to work just fine in your hands. He paused, then added, You said you didn't play? I don't anymore. May closed the fallboard carefully. I used to. A long time ago. Some things, Mr. Rivera said, we never truly stop doing. We just take breaks. He slipped his glasses into his shirt pocket. My wife would have loved to hear you play. Music like that shouldn't be hidden away. With a small nod, he turned and left, the bell above the door tinkling softly as it closed behind him. May sat at the piano for a long time after he left, not playing, just thinking. Then she locked up and caught the last bus home, her mind quieter than it had been in years. The next morning started like any other. May arrived early, set up the coffee, and prepared for the breakfast rush. But something was different. Mr. Chen kept smiling at her in a strange way. Danny practically bounced with excitement when she arrived. Even Jerry seemed to be watching her with unusual interest. "What?" May finally asked when Danny nearly spilled coffee from grinning so widely. "Do I have something on my face?" "You," Danny said, pulling out her phone, "are famous." She held up the screen showing a video that already had thousands of views. The title read, "Hidden Talent Waitress Plays Piano Beautifully After Hours." May's stomach dropped. There she was, sitting at the diner's piano, lost in the music, completely unaware she was being filmed through the window. The video had been posted to several social media platforms overnight and was spreading rapidly. "Who?" May began, but she already knew. The angle of the video showed it had been taken from outside, through the front window of the diner. Someone passing by must have seen her playing and decided to record it. "This is great publicity for the diner," Tom exclaimed, coming in through the back. "We've already got people calling to ask if the piano waitress will be playing tonight." "I'm not," May started, but her protest was cut short by the bell above the door. A group of customers entered, more than usual for this time on a Wednesday. They took seats, several of them glancing at her with interest, then at the piano in the corner. One woman actually took a picture of the instrument on her phone. "I've got tables to serve," May said firmly, grabbing her order pad and escaping to the dining area. But throughout the morning more people came. Many of them ordered only coffee and asked when the piano waitress would play. By lunchtime, the diner was busier than May had ever seen it. Tom was practically dancing with joy as he rang up orders. "I don't understand," May said during a brief lull, collapsing onto a stool at the counter. "It's just piano playing. Amateur piano playing at that." "It's not just piano playing," Danny said, sliding a fresh cup of coffee toward her. "It's the story. The waitress with the hidden talent. People love that stuff." May shook her head, unable to process how quickly things were changing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from her mother. "Mrs. Patel showed me the video. Why didn't you tell me you were playing again?" Before May could reply, the bell rang once more. She looked up to see a well-dressed woman enter the diner. Unlike the other curious visitors, this woman moved with purpose, scanning the room until her eyes landed on May. "Are you the pianist from the video?" she asked, approaching the counter. Yes, but I'm not really." "Vivian Lee," the woman said, extending her hand. "I teach at the community college. Our regular pianist for the evening classes had to relocate unexpectedly. We need someone immediately. The pay isn't much, but—" May stared at her, speechless. Was this woman offering her a job? Playing piano? "I don't think," May began. "Just think about it," Vivian interrupted, placing a business card on the counter. "Call me by tomorrow if you're interested. The schedule is flexible." As quickly as she had appeared, Vivian was gone, leaving May staring at the card in her hand. "You should do it," Danny said, having overheard everything. May slipped the card into her pocket without responding. The lunch rush was starting, and she had no time to think about pianos or teaching or anything except getting food to tables. But as the day wore on, something shifted inside her. Each time a customer mentioned the video, each time someone looked at her with newfound respect or interest, a tiny spark of something long dormant flickered to life: hope. By the end of her shift, May had received 3 more offers, one to play at a wedding, one to teach private lessons to a customer's child, and one from Tom himself. "Play for an hour each evening," he proposed as she was hanging up her apron. "I'll pay you extra and you can keep any tips people leave. The diner's never been this busy. It's good for business, good for you." He trailed off, looking at her expectantly. May thought of her mother's medical bills, of the car that needed repairs, of the tiny spark of hope that had been growing all day. "I'll think about it," she said finally. That night, she sat with her mother in their small living room, the video playing on Mrs. Zhang's tablet for what must have been the 10th time. "You play differently now," her mother observed, with more feeling. May looked at the screen, at her own face transformed by the music. "I thought that part of me was gone," she admitted quietly. Her mother reached over and took her hand. "Some things become part of us forever. They cannot be lost, only waiting to be found again." The business card sat on the table between them. "A choice, a chance. What are you going to do?" her mother asked. May looked at the video once more, At the woman she barely recognized, the one whose face showed peace and passion and purpose. "I think," she said slowly, "I'm going to play." By the following week, May's life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The video of her playing had now been viewed over 2 million times. Local news stations had picked up the story, and reporters kept showing up at the diner hoping to interview the piano waitress, as everyone now called her. Tom had rearranged the diner to put the piano in a more central spot. Every evening from 7 to 8, May would play while customers ate dinner, the tips in the jar on top of the piano often adding up to more than she made in a full shift of waiting tables. "You should start a social media account," Danny suggested as they prepared for the morning rush. "You could make money from all those views." May shook her head. "I'm not trying to be famous. I just want to play," and it was true. After years of silence, the music that had once been such a vital part of her had returned, stronger and more passionate than before. She had accepted the position at the community college, teaching piano basics 2 evenings a week. She'd also taken on 3 private students, all regular customers from the diner who had heard her play and wanted lessons. For the first time in years, May felt like she was breathing fully, like she had woken up from a long sleep, and the extra money meant her mother could get better care, a specialist they couldn't afford before, medications that weren't covered by insurance. "You seem happier," her mother observed one night as May massaged cream into her aching hands. "Your eyes shine again," May smiled. "I feel happier." "I always knew the music would find its way back to you," her mother said softly. "Your father would be so proud." The mention of her father brought a familiar pang, but now it was accompanied by something else, a sense of connection, of continuity. When she played, she could almost feel him beside her, guiding her fingers as he had when she was a child. The next day was Saturday, and the diner was packed. May moved between tables with practiced efficiency, but she could feel the anticipation in the air. People weren't just there for the food anymore. Around noon, a hush fell over the diner. May turned to see what had caused it, and found herself face to face with a woman she recognized immediately. Lena. Wong was a world-renowned concert pianist who had graduated from the same conservatory May had attended. Her recordings sold millions and her concerts sold out in minutes, and now somehow she was standing in Rosie's diner looking directly at May. "I thought it was you," Lena said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. "When I saw the video, I wasn't sure at first. But those hands, I'd recognize them anywhere." May stood frozen, coffee pot still in hand. They had been classmates once upon a time. Not friends exactly. Lena had always been a step ahead, destined for greatness, while May had just been trying to keep up. But they had known each other, had played duets in master classes, had competed for the same scholarships. "Hello, Lena," May managed to say, her voice steadier than she felt. "What brings you here?" Lena glanced around at the watching customers, then back to May. "Can we talk somewhere private?" Tom practically shoved them into his small office at the back of the diner. "Take all the time you need," he said, closing the door behind him, but not before May caught the gleam of excitement in his eyes. "More publicity for the diner." "So," Lena said once they were alone, "a waitress." There was no judgment in her tone, just curiosity, but May felt defensive anyway. "Life happens," she said shortly. "Not all of us get to tour the world." Lena nodded, accepting this. "I saw the video last week. I was in town for a concert and recognized the diner name in the comments. I had to see for myself." "Well, now you've seen," May said, unsure why she was being so prickly. Maybe because Lena represented the path she might have taken, the life she might have had if things had been different. "You're better than you were at school," Lena said, surprising her. "Technical skill is one thing, but what you have now, it's something else. Something real." May didn't know how to respond to that. She had never thought of herself as anything special, not compared to someone like Lena. "I have a proposition for you," Lena continued. "I'm starting a music education foundation. Free lessons for kids who can't afford them. Instruments for schools that need them. I need teachers, good ones. People who understand that music isn't just about technique, it's about expression. About life." She paused, looking directly at May. "People like you." May stared at her, trying to process what she was hearing. "You want me to teach? For your foundation?" "To start with, yes. Eventually, maybe more." There's a concert next month, a fundraiser. Several pianists playing to raise money for the foundation. I want you to be one of them. A concert, a real concert, with an audience who had come specifically to hear music, not diner patrons who happened to be eating during her playing hour. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. I can't, May said automatically. I have responsibilities here. My mother is part of why you should do this, Lena interrupted gently. The position pays well, May, better than waiting tables. And it includes health benefits, health benefits. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility, with hope. I need to think about it, May said finally. Lena nodded, reaching into her purse and pulling out a business card. Call me when you decide. But don't wait too long. The concert is in 4 weeks. She left as suddenly as she had arrived, leaving May standing in Tom's cramped office, holding a business card that felt impossibly heavy for such a small piece of paper. When she emerged, the diner was buzzing with excitement. Everyone wanted to know what Lena Wong had wanted with their piano waitress. May deflected the questions as best she could, focusing on her work, trying to sort through her own tangled thoughts. By the time her evening piano hour came around, she was exhausted, but as soon as her fingers touched the keys, everything else fell away. She played with a ferocity that surprised even her, pouring all her confusion and hope and fear into the music. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. She looked up to see the diner packed to capacity, with more people peering in through the windows from outside. And in the back, standing quietly by the door, was Lena Wong, a small smile on her face. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, May knew what her answer would be. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. May continued to work at the diner, but now she spent her breaks practicing on the piano instead of resting. Tom had been surprisingly supportive when she told him about Lena's offer. I always knew you were too good for this place, he said gruffly. Just promise you'll come back and play sometimes. Good for business. Her students at the community college were excited for her, as were her private students. Even Jerry, the perpetually grumpy cook, seemed proud, though he tried to hide it behind his usual scowl. The hardest conversation was with her mother. I won't take it if you don't want me to, May said as they sat together in their small living room. I don't want to let you down again. Her mother looked at her with surprise. Let me down? When have you ever let me down? When I dropped out of school, when I couldn't become what Dad wanted me to be. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Oh, my child, is that what you've been carrying all these years? Your father never wanted you to be famous. He just wanted you to be happy. She took May's hand in hers. And so do I. But what about your care? If I'm teaching and performing, I won't be around as much. There are home health aides for that. With real benefits, we could afford one. Her mother squeezed her hand. You've put your life on hold for too long. It's time for you to play again, really play. So May had called Lena and accepted the offer. Now, as she stood backstage at the city's most prestigious concert hall, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. What if she froze? What if she couldn't play in front of so many people? It had been years since she'd performed in a proper concert. Nervous, Lena appeared beside her, elegant in a silver evening gown. Terrified, May admitted. Good, the fear keeps you sharp. Lena smiled. Just remember why you're playing. May thought of her father, who had given her the gift of music, of her mother, who had never stopped believing in her, of the customers at the diner who had applauded her rusty playing and helped her believe in herself again. When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage with her head held high. The grand piano gleamed under the lights, far bigger and more imposing than the upright at the diner. The audience was a sea of expectant faces. She sat down at the bench, adjusted it slightly, and placed her hands on the keys. And in that moment, just before she began to play, a strange sense of peace washed over her. This was where she belonged. This was who she was meant to be. May took a deep breath and began to play. The applause was deafening. May sat at the grand piano, her chest heaving slightly, her fingers still tingling from the final notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. She had chosen the piece deliberately. It was challenging, emotional, and had always reminded her of her father. Playing it tonight felt like coming full circle. As she stood and bowed to the audience, she caught sight of her mother in the front row. Mrs. Zhang was being helped to her feet by a home health aide, but her face was radiant with pride as she clapped harder than anyone else in the concert hall. Backstage, Lena embraced her. "That was magnificent," she said. "I knew you had it in you." The concert had been a tremendous success. All 7 pianists had played beautifully, and the donations for Lena's Music Foundation had exceeded expectations. But according to the whispers May had heard, her performance had been the highlight of the evening. "There's someone who wants to meet you," Lena said, guiding May through the crowd of well-wishers. A tall man in an expensive suit stood waiting by the stage door. His silver hair was cut short and his face was lined but handsome. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar to May, though she couldn't place him. "May Jung, this is Henry Wilson. He's a music producer." The name hit May like a physical blow. Henry Wilson, the man who had offered her a recording contract 10 years ago, just before her father died. The contract she had turned down to come home and help her mother. "We've met before," Henry said, his eyes crinkling at the corners, "though you probably don't remember." "You were very young." "I remember," May said quietly. How could she forget? It had been the biggest opportunity of her young life, dangled before her and then snatched away by fate. "You've grown as a musician," Henry continued. "What I heard tonight was extraordinary. The technique is there, of course, but it's the emotion that sets you apart. You play like someone who has lived." May nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She had lived, yes. Had worked hard, had sacrificed, had put her dreams aside, and somehow those very sacrifices had shaped her playing into something worth hearing. "I'd like to talk to you about recording an album," Henry said. "Nothing commercial, classical, with perhaps a few modern pieces. Your interpretation of Rachmaninoff tells me you have something unique to offer. An album, a real recording, something that would last, something her father would never hear, but perhaps his memory would live on through her playing." "I'll think about it," May said, the same response she had given Lena weeks ago. Henry smiled and handed her his card. "That's all I ask." Later that night, as May and her mother returned to their small apartment, Mrs. Zhang took her daughter's hand. "You're going to take his offer, aren't you?" she asked. May hesitated. "I don't know. It would mean more time away from home, from you, and I've only just started with the foundation. I don't want to abandon that." Her mother chuckled softly. "Always worrying about others. When will you start worrying about yourself?" "I am," May protested. "That's why I'm hesitating. This is all happening so fast. 2 months ago I was just a waitress. Now I'm teaching, performing, and getting offered recording contracts. It doesn't feel real." "But it is real," her mother said firmly. "This is your second chance, May. Don't waste it worrying about me." May knew her mother was right, but the decision still felt overwhelming. She slept fitfully that night, dreams filled with music and memories and faces from her past. The next morning she received a text from Tom. "Diner's not the same without you. Customers keep asking when you're coming back to play." Despite everything that had happened, May missed the diner, missed the simplicity of it, the routine, the familiar faces. It had been her safe harbor for 8 years. But she knew she couldn't go back to being just a waitress. Not now. Not after rediscovering the music inside her. After breakfast, she helped her mother with her exercises, then left her with the home health aide, who now came 3 times a week. The foundation job paid enough to afford this care, and the health insurance covered many of Mrs. Zhang's medications. It was a relief not to worry constantly about money anymore. May walked to the community college where she taught her piano classes. The fall air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath her feet. She had 2 classes today, both filled with eager students ranging from teenagers to retirees. Teaching had come naturally to her surprise. She enjoyed watching her students progress, seeing the same love of music awaken in them that had been nurtured in her as a child. Between classes, she checked her phone and found 3 missed calls from Lena. When she called back, Lena's voice was bubbling with excitement. "The video from the concert is going viral," she said without preamble. "Over 5 million views already. People are calling you the Waitress virtuoso. Henry's been fielding calls all morning from other labels interested in you." May sat down, suddenly dizzy. "Other labels?" "This is just the beginning, May. The foundation is important and we still want you involved, but this could be huge for you. For us too. The publicity is driving donations through the roof." After they hung up, May went to her second class in a daze. As she guided her students through their lessons, her mind kept returning to Henry's offer. An album. Possibly more now that other labels were interested. What would her father think? He had always believed in her talent, had sacrificed to give her lessons, to buy their second-hand piano. Would he want her to seize this opportunity, or would he worry, as she did, about what it might cost her? After class, instead of going straight home, May found herself walking to Rosie's diner. It was mid-afternoon, the slow period between lunch and dinner. Tom was behind the counter, looking up in surprise when she walked in. "Well, look who's here," the famous concert pianist gracing us with her presence. His tone was teasing, but his smile was genuine. "Not famous," May protested, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "Just playing again. Playing amazingly, from what I hear. The concert was a big hit." "It went well," May admitted. "Better than I expected." Tom poured her a cup of coffee without asking. "Some habits died hard. So what brings you back to this greasy spoon? Surely you have fancier places to be now." May wrapped her hands around the mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I guess I just needed to see a familiar place. Everything's changing so fast." "Change can be good," Tom said, leaning on the counter. "Look at you. 2 months ago you were serving eggs and refilling coffee. Now you're on your way to being a star." "I'm not trying to be a star," May said, echoing what she'd told Danny weeks ago. "I just want to play." "And now you can," Tom pointed out. "Isn't that what you wanted?" Was it? May wasn't sure anymore. She had wanted to play, yes, but she hadn't anticipated the attention, the pressure, the expectations that would come with it. She hadn't considered how exposing herself through music would make her feel so vulnerable. The bell above the door rang, and a group of teenagers entered the diner. They took a booth in the corner, but one of them kept glancing over at May. "Oh my God," the girl finally said, approaching the counter. "Are you the piano waitress? From the videos?" May nodded, uncomfortable with the recognition. "I saw you play at the concert last week. It was incredible. I'm learning piano too, but I didn't think it could be. Cool, you know? But the way you played that classical piece like it was a rock anthem," the girl seemed genuinely moved. "It made me want to practice more." That's good," May said, touched despite her discomfort. "Practice is important. Would you sign my notebook?" the girl asked, holding out a music composition book. May hesitated, then took the pen the girl offered. She signed her name, feeling ridiculous, then added, "Music is the sound of your heart. Let it speak." The words had been her father's, something he used to tell her when she struggled with a difficult piece. The girl read the inscription, her eyes widening. "That's beautiful," she said. "Thank you." After she returned to her friends, Tom raised an eyebrow at May. "Not famous, huh?" May shook her head, but she was smiling. Maybe this was part of it. Inspiring others the way her father had inspired her. Using her music not just to express herself, but to touch others, to remind them of the beauty and emotion that could be found in notes and chords. Later that evening, she sat with her mother in their living room. The apartment was small, but it was home. It held memories of her father teaching her to play on their old upright piano, of her mother's unwavering support through the hard years, of quiet moments and difficult ones shared together. "I've made a decision," May said, "about Henry's offer." Her mother looked up from her crocheting. "And? I'm going to do it. The album, I mean, but on my terms. I want to include a piece that Dad used to play, that folk song he loved so much. And I want the liner notes to tell our story, not just about me being a waitress who got discovered, but about him, and you and everything that led me here." Mrs. Zhang's eyes shone with tears. "He would be so proud, May, so very proud." "There's something else," May continued. "Henry said that if the album does well, there might be a tour. Nothing huge, small venues mostly, but it would mean traveling. And you're worried about leaving me," her mother finished for her. May nodded. "Then I'll come with you," Mrs. Zhang said simply. "The doctor says I'm stable enough to travel now with proper care, and I would like to see you play in different cities, to see the world a little, before I can't anymore." The thought of having her mother with her, of sharing this journey together, filled May with a sense of rightness she hadn't expected. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was, but they would face it together as they always had. "Okay," May said, a smile spreading across her face. "Okay." She took her mother's hands in hers, noticing how similar they were. The same long fingers, the same graceful wrists. Hands made for music. "Then let's play," her mother said, echoing May's words from weeks ago. Yes, May thought. Let's play. 1 year later, May stood in front of Rosie's diner, taking in the familiar storefront with its slightly faded sign and cheerful red awning. So much had changed, yet this place remained almost exactly the same. There was comfort in that. She pushed open the door, smiling at the familiar jingle of the bell. The lunch rush was just ending, and several customers looked up as she entered. A few recognized her and nudged their companions, whispering behind their hands. "Well, look who's back in town," Tom called from behind the counter, his face breaking into a wide grin. "The famous pianist returns to her humble beginnings." Mee rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. "I told you to stop calling me that." "Can't help it if it's true," Tom said, coming around to give her a quick hug. "How long are you home for this time?" "A month," May replied, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "We just finished the East Coast leg of the tour, taking a break before we head to Europe in July." It still felt surreal saying it out loud. Europe, her, playing concerts in London, Paris, Berlin, places she'd only dreamed of visiting, now part of her professional life. The album had done better than anyone had expected, climbing classical music charts and even crossing over to mainstream success. The story behind it, the waitress who had set aside her dreams only to rediscover them years later, had captured people's imagination. "Coffee?" Tom asked, already reaching for a mug. "Please," May said. Some things never changed, and she was glad for it. As Tom poured, the kitchen door swung open and Jerry stuck his head out. "Thought I heard your voice," he said gruffly. "About time you showed up. Your mother's been bragging about you for months." May laughed. "She's my biggest fan. How is she?" Tom asked, sliding the coffee across to her. "Good, all things considered. The treatments are helping. She didn't come with me for the last 3 cities. Stayed with my aunt in Boston instead. The traveling was getting to be too much for her. But she's excited about Europe. Says she always wanted to see Paris." A comfortable silence fell between them as May sipped her coffee. It had been a whirlwind year, recording the album, promoting it, then the tour. Through it all, her mother had been by her side, watching proudly from the wings at each performance, her health managed by a combination of better care and the sheer determination to see her daughter succeed. "So," Tom said eventually, "what brings you to the diner today?" "Besides my charming company and Jerry's world-famous grilled cheese?" Mee set down her mug. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. A business proposition." Tom raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "The diner's been struggling, right? Even with all the publicity from last year, it's still hard to compete with the big chains opening up on the highway." Tom sighed. "Can't argue with that. We're getting by, but..." He shrugged. "What if we change things up a bit?" Mee suggested. "What if Rosie's became not just a diner but a music venue? A place where people could come for good food and live music, maybe even lessons during off hours?" Tom looked skeptical. "Sounds expensive. And complicated." "It would be an investment," May acknowledged. "But I've been saving, and with the advance for the second album..." She paused, letting that sink in. "I could be a partner. Help with the renovations, bring in some of the people I've met this past year. We could start small. Weekend performances, open mic nights. Build from there." "Why?" Tom asked bluntly. "You're on your way up, kid. Why look back?" May gazed around the diner, taking in the worn booths, the counter where she'd served countless cups of coffee, the corner where the old piano had first stood. "Because this is where it started again for me. And because not everyone gets discovered through a viral video, there's talent everywhere in unexpected places. I want to create a space for it." She looked back at Tom. "Also, you gave me a chance when I needed one. I'd like to return the favor." Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached below the counter and pulled out a set of blueprints. "Funny you should mention renovations," he said. "I've been playing with some ideas myself." May laughed in surprise. "You have?" "Been thinking about it since you left. The piano brought in good business. Got me wondering what else might work." He spread the blueprints on the counter. "Nothing fancy, but..." They bent their heads together over the plans, discussing possibilities. By the time they looked up, an hour had passed, and the diner was filling up again for the early dinner crowd. "Well," Tom said, rolling up the blueprints, "guess we should talk numbers." "You're really serious about this?" May nodded. "I am." "Then let's do it, partner." Tom held out his hand and May shook it firmly. As she left the diner, May felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. This past year had been incredible, a dream come true in many ways. But something had been missing. A sense of purpose beyond just playing, beyond just her own success. She walked to her mother's house, her childhood home, which they'd been able to buy back with her album proceeds. Mrs. Zhang was in the garden, sitting in a wheelchair but actively directing a young neighbor boy where to plant her flowers. "May," she called, her face lighting up. "How was your meeting with Tom?" "Good," May said, bending to kiss her cheek. "Really good. He's on board with the idea." "Of course he is," her mother said confidently. "It's a wonderful plan. Your father would have loved it." They went inside for tea, and as May prepared it, she found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From child prodigy to struggling waitress to recording artist, and now, potentially, a business owner and mentor to others. "Do you ever wonder," she asked as she set the tea tray on the table, "what would have happened if that person hadn't recorded me playing that night? If the video had never gone viral?" Her mother considered this as she added honey to her tea. "Perhaps another path would have opened, or perhaps you would have found your way back to music differently. The important thing is that you were ready when the moment came." May smiled. Her mother always had a way of cutting through to the heart of things. That evening, May visited Lena, who had moved to town 6 months ago to run the local branch of her music foundation. They sat in Lena's backyard watching fireflies rise from the grass as the sun set. "So Tom agreed to the plan?" Lena asked, sipping a glass of wine. "He did. We're going to start renovations next week while I'm in town." "And you're sure about this? Taking on a business when your career is just taking off?" May had asked herself the same question many times. "I'm sure. The touring is amazing and I love performing, but I want something more. Something that lasts, that helps others the way you helped me." Lena studied her thoughtfully. "You know, when I first saw that video of you playing in the diner, what struck me wasn't just your talent. It was the way you played, like someone who understood that music isn't just about technique or showing off. It's about connection, about touching people's hearts." She raised her glass in a small toast. "I think this new venture will suit you perfectly." The next morning, May rose early. She had a full day ahead. A meeting with a contractor about the diner renovations, lunch with her first piano teacher who still lived in town, and then dinner with her mother and the specialist who had been overseeing her care. But first, she had somewhere important to go. The cemetery was quiet in the early morning light. May made her way to her father's grave, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. She knelt and placed them against the headstone, tracing his name with her finger. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. "It's been a while since I've visited." "Been a little busy?" She smiled. "I think you'd get a kick out of all this. Your little girl, playing concerts around the country. About to go to Europe. Mom's coming too. She's doing better these days." A gentle breeze stirred the flowers, and somewhere nearby a bird began to sing. "I'm starting something new," May continued. "Remember how you always said music should be shared? That it wasn't meant to be kept to oneself? I'm turning the diner where I worked into a place for music. For people to learn and perform and discover their own voices." She paused. "I think maybe that's why I found my way back to playing. Not just for myself, but to create something that might help others find their way too." She sat in silence for a few minutes, feeling close to her father in a way she hadn't in years. Not with sadness or regret, but with a sense of continuity, of carrying something forward. As she walked back to her car, her phone rang. It was Henry, her producer. "Just checking in," he said when she answered. "How's the hometown visit going?" "Good," May replied, looking back at the cemetery one last time before driving away. "Really good. Actually, I've been thinking about some ideas for the next album." "I'm all ears," Henry said. As May drove through town toward the diner, she began to describe her vision, pieces that told stories, that connected her classical training with the more accessible, emotional style she'd developed playing in the diner. Music that might reach people who, like her, had lost touch with something they loved or never had the chance to discover it in the first place. The diner came into view, its worn sign catching the morning sun. Soon it would be transformed, becoming something new while honoring what it had been, like her music. May pulled into the parking lot and turned off the engine. Through the window, she could see Tom already inside, going over the blueprints with a man who must be the contractor. The future was waiting. Her future, not the one she'd once imagined as a young student, not the one she'd resigned herself to as a waitress, but something uniquely her own. A life built from all those experiences, all those versions of herself. She got out of the car and walked toward the diner, toward the next chapter of her story. The bell jingled as she pushed open the door, and Tom looked up with a smile. "Ready to get started?" he asked. May nodded, feeling a familiar tingle of anticipation in her fingers. The same feeling she got just before playing when all possibilities lay before her. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready."